So please bring them in, and particularly the panelists, because we're going to start right now. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Carlos Duarte. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Coral R&D Accelerator Platform, or otherwise known as CORDAP. And it's my pleasure today to welcome a distinguished set of speakers and panelists to discuss coral action in a sustainable blue economy framework. And then we're going to discuss the case study of the Red Sea. Salam alaikum to all attendees. And I'll first introduce the speakers, and then I'll set the scene with just one slide, and then I will hand over the podium to my colleagues. So today we have as panel moderator Dr. Maryam Ficocielo from the Red Sea Global, who's sitting with us. Then we also have Dr. Osama Faqeeha, that is the Deputy Minister of Environment of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Dr. Osama, for coming. And Dr. Osama is also the chair of the Initiative Governance Committee of CORDAP, and also the chair of the CORDAP Foundation. So he's more here on the role of CORDAP, but also on his capacity as Deputy Minister of Environment of the Kingdom. Then we're also privileged to have with us His Royal Highness Prince Sultan bin Fahad bin Salman Al Saud, that is the chairman of the Saudi Water Sports and Diving Federation, but also has been playing a role in a domestic national program to start to think about how can we move the Red Sea into a blue economy framework. And then we also have Mr. Alman Soleiman, who is the Commissioner for Environmental Affairs at the Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority. Thank you so much for joining us. And then that closes the set of speakers. So after opening the panel, the event, then I will invite the panelists to come to the stage, and then, thank you, and then invite Dr. Osama to have a first opening statement, and then each of the panelists will have a 5-minute address followed by a discussion moderated by Dr. Maryam Ficocielo. So first of all, advancing science and technology to conserve coral reefs requires the deployment of new technologies and conservation actions, and this can only be done if we have the right framework to be able to govern the deployment of these actions. So as important as the science and technology is the framework that is going to be responsible to removing the pressure so that the actions are effective, and also to be able to create the enabling conditions for the restoration and conservation actions to succeed. So it's not just a matter about advancing science, but it's a matter also of having the right governance arrangements and collaborative arrangements to promote a blue economy. So a blue economy differs from the maritime economy in that the maritime economy, which is the business as usual way in which we have interacted with the ocean, is mostly based on extractive activities. So in the maritime economy, we conduct shipping, we extract living organisms for fisheries, we also extract minerals, gas and oil. But in the blue economy, we pledge that economic advancement through marine-based activities is compatible with not only sustainable and conservation of the ocean resources, but actually a regenerative approach to enhance the environment. So the governance structures for blue economy are very different from those of a maritime economy, and they involve a broader slate of actors, and they also require more elaborated governance arrangements. And that's what we're going to be discussing today, drawing on the case of the Red Sea, particularly the Saudi Economic Exclusive Zone, where the Red Sea that contains about 6% of the world's coral reefs. So this is all I would like to say to set the scene. And with this, I'll give the floor to Dr. Osama Faqeeha to make a statement to reflect on how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is approaching this challenge of coordinating all entities to be able to enable the conservation and restoration of coral reefs. So over to you, Dr. Osama.
Thank you, Professor Carlos. In the beginning, I would like to thank His Royal Highness Prof. Sultan bin Fahad for honoring us with his presence. It's a really great privilege to have him with us. Despite his really significant commitments, he made the efforts to be with us here. That's a great honor and pleasure. I'd like to also thank the Ocean Pavilion for really making this event possible. Now, from Saudi perspective, I mean, really conserving and protecting coral reef comes with the general national framework for environment as a whole. Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia really recognized the importance of environmental protection as the third pillar for sustainable development. Together with economic growth and social prosperity, you cannot have sustainable development without the third pillar, which is protecting and conserving environment. And this has been translated through the National Environmental Strategy, which really resulted in restructuring the whole environmental sector in Saudi Arabia, creating 5 national environmental centers. Each center is given an environmental agenda, a national environmental task, like we have the National Center for Combating Desertification, because that's a national priority, the National Center to ensure compliance of all economic activities, the National Center for Waste Management to make sure that waste management is done properly and we increase the recycling rate and beneficial use, the National Center for Wildlife to protect biodiversity, both terrestrial and marine, and the National Center for Meteorology, which really, in addition to meteorological issues, now running the Regional Center for Climate Studies and the Regional Center for Dust and Sandstorms. Also, we have developed the national strategy for the Red Sea, which will be announced formally by the leadership very soon, which really focus on conserving the Red Sea, which is really very important to the kingdom and all other countries really at the Red Sea coastline, east and west of the Red Sea. We are also working with regional countries to develop a regional framework, how we can conserve the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden environment. Back to a national level, now we are really enhancing compliance of all activities through the National Center of Environmental Compliance. The National Center for Wildlife is really now working to expand the protected areas. In 2016, we had 4% of Saudi Arabia, 4.3% to be exact, of Saudi Arabia declared as protected area. Today, and due to the country's focus on environment, now we have more than 16% of Saudi Arabia declared a protected area, and aligned with the Montreal targets now, coming targets, we are targeting 30% marine and terrestrial protected areas, and this is we are collaborating with others. Now, also, we have created, the country created the General Organization for Coral Reef and Turtles, and its job is to work with others to conserve and restore coral reef. The General Authority for the Red Sea to really regulate the marine tourism activities, because Saudi Arabia has very ambitious plans to promote ecotourism, and the preserving the natural asset is core to this. And that's why I want to make sure that really ecotourism is promoted while effective conservation measures for coral as the other coastal and marine habitats are preserved. As Professor Carlos mentioned, coral is a global challenge, and through the G20 group, the global initiative or platform to advance R&D has been launched. We already sadly lost a big portion of corals, and we are set to lose more if we continue, if business as usual continues, and other stresses continue as much. So we have to really do something drastic, and I think CORDAP is trying to really advance innovation, because we believe without it we cannot bring restoration to the global scale. Again, I think awareness, engagement of all stakeholders, whether it's government, businesses, NGOs, and also scientific and innovation communities, all are needed to really conserve coral reef, one of the most precious habitats on our planet Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Osama. So now I will invite His Royal Highness Prince Sultan to make a statement and then join the panel afterwards. Your Royal Highness.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this endeavor, and I'm really honored to be here and amongst everyone that has the same concerns as we do. Let me explain why I'm here, right? Not being a government employee or part of the environmental ecosystem in Saudi. If we don't have the thriving environment in the Red Sea, I wouldn't have a job. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today. This is fundamental for me and everyone like me. I represent the 95% of rest of Saudi that is not a government employee, that is not sort of a decision maker. We are responsible for maintaining the Red Sea. Now, the first time I realized my whole concept of perfection was extremely flawed was when I started to go diving. I was 16 years old, and I noticed how everything around me seemed random and in complete chaos, right? But in effect, they all fit perfectly in unison. But they all thrive on instinct and instinct alone. We have instinct and our brains at the same time. But when you look at all the decisions that we make, all we do is ruin the environment even more. Yet we seem to think we're the smarter part of this universe, of this planet. Our actions speak otherwise. Today, amongst everyone here, I really do hope we make the right decisions to change that. I really do hope we go back to understanding what perfection actually is, which is just all of us fitting in the right place at the right time without ruining everything else. I invite everyone here to change their practice to the best they can. For me, it was one step in the right direction, and that step was provided to me by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed when he asked me to chair the steering committee for the Red Sea Sustainability Project, or at that time was Sustainability Project, which myself, Dr. Maryam, Dr. Carlos, Dr. Osama, and several other people, which came into fruition, and you will see this announcement hopefully sooner rather than later, which is the National Red Sea Sustainability Strategy, which brings all stakeholders in Saudi together to keep our Red Sea, to keep it thriving, to keep it for next generations. And to be quite honest, we're going to be the example for the whole world of what to do to sustain the oceans. And thank you everyone for your time. I can see everyone here is feeling just as hot as I am from the weather. And just as a reminder, this is what coral feels like in the water today. So we need to change that for ourselves and coral as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness, and thank you for joining us today in this hot environment, but also for your leadership in bringing this 95% of non-government employees, Saudi citizens, to lead the development of the strategy.
Them. I don't speak for them. There are too many people.
No, I know, but but I've been working with Your Royal Highness already for 6 years, and your leadership has given a tremendous impetus to the strategy.
Believe
Thank
me,
you.
It's tiny in comparison to both you and Dr. Osama and what you bring to the table. It's genuinely you guys who do what we strive to help. So thank you both. Really.
Thank you so much. So we will invite now His Excellency Ayman Suleiman, Commissioner for Environment Affairs at the Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority. And you have some slides to show. So let me just flip to the first slide. Yes. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, colleagues and friends, good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak before this group of people, environmentalists. I am from the Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority in Jordan, Aqaba. Aqaba, for those who are not familiar with the place, is a small city sitting at the northern tip of Gulf of Aqaba. As may you know, that we have a limited shorelines. We have only 27 kilometers of shorelines, and it is the only outlet to the sea in Jordan. And the challenge for us as an authority is to accommodate all the needed developments in the same area within these limited shorelines. Aqaba Special Economic Zone Authority was established in 2001, and after 20 years of regulating the area as a special zone, we start really looking back and reviewing what actually we are doing. And that was the initiative that came at a later stage in 2020 by the King, His Majesty, by declaring 7 kilometers out of the 27 as a marine protected area. Since then, we have been really looking and reviewing our bylaws, the regulations, and the actual activities that we are doing there to ensure that we really save whatever left and to reduce the stresses on the coral reef there that we are thinking it could be a part of the global plans for the recovery if the climate change actually keeps the same rhythm. So we are today looking at a tourism sector as a main sector in Aqaba because almost 60% or 70% of our activities and development in Aqaba is tourism. We depend on the number of the visitors to this small city. We have over 2 million visitors a year. We have 6,000 jobs in this small city. It has 150 inhabitants, so we don't have big population there. So we have 63 hotels. We have a few developments to serve this sector. But we look at the near areas that we can accommodate within our strategy in tourism, which is Wadi Rum. And we think that sustainable tourism is a key driver within the strategic action that we have. Yes. Sorry. So we are looking at Aqaba as a green city. All the development has been done within a sustainable framework. So now we are going into green city and a blue action plan and green action plan. So we are, in terms of the greening the city in the tourism sector, we are looking to hire organizations to ensure the budget is in place, first of all, and then execute some initiatives and products and sustainability. We are planning to market Aqaba as a sustainable destination. The organizational enablers for this are sustainable tourism value proposition and the credible sustainability claims. Of course, international recognition is very important for us. So that's why we are going for Green Key, we are going for sustainability certification for divers, green fence. We are looking at IUCN. We are registering our marine reserve as on the green list of the IUCN. We are working with the UNESCO to register the reserve on the list. It is already on the list, but we are handing our file next year. In order to really make this happening, we don't forget the science behind this. That's why Aqaba Marine Park has 3 components. One of them is the Aqaba Marine Reserve. The other components is being built with one building. We have aquarium that will serve together with a research center to look at corals, look at the research at the marine environment, look at the genetic bank, to study more and to call for partnership. We want researchers to come in Aqaba and stay there in our labs to do the research and look at pharmaceutical products, look at the conservation products, look at what is unique about the corals in the Gulf of Aqaba. We know that they are unique and they could be the only hope for the rehabilitation of any corals due to climate change in the future. With this, I would like to thank everybody for listening.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And in fact, the efforts of the Kingdom of Jordan are essential because the Gulf of Aqaba is recognized to hold the most thermal resilient coral reefs in the ocean. So we look at your waters with hope for the future of corals in the whole ocean. And I hereby will invite the Kingdom of Jordan to join CORDAP. That is open to all nations to join us with this effort to seek a future through science and technology for coral reefs globally. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I will then invite our moderator, Dr. Maryam Ficocielo, who's the Secretary of the Executive Committee for a Sustainable Red Sea Economy that is led by His Royal Highness, to make a statement and then open the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos, and welcome to our fellow panelists, as well as welcome to everyone with us in the room today. Of course, I can't emphasize enough how important the Red Sea and Gulf of Aqaba is for global trade, as well as for the importance of saving all sorts of species that live in it. As you know, there's about 2,000 species of fish alone in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. There's also about 300 species of coral there. You all remember the incident in 2021 when we had a ship get stuck in the canal of Suez Canal, and that costed the world about 54 billion in losses. So I can't emphasize enough how important the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden is. And with those remarks, I think I'll turn to our panelists and maybe ask them a few questions. I'll just ask one question of each of the panelists and then maybe open it up for a conversation in the room, if that's okay. So maybe we can start with Dr. Osama. Yes, I think there's one right here. Perfect. So Dr. Osama, you talked about the importance of, or you talked about some of the efforts in Saudi Arabia to preserve and protect the environment and to preserve and protect also the Red Sea. Can you tell us what are the biggest, say, two or three challenges that are faced in the Red Sea today from your perspective?
Okay. I think, of course, for the Red Sea, I think one of the biggest challenges we are having is the traffic, the international traffic. As you mentioned, it's the bridge between east and west, so that's really a huge traffic, and that traffic has an environmental impact. So we worked with the regional organization for the Sea, Bersiga, and the regional countries. We work with the IMO to really declare the Red Sea to be a special marine area. And alhamdulillah, we succeeded, and it will be from January 2025 will be really implemented. And this will require that the ship operators who use the Red Sea should really take more stringent environmental precautions in terms of how they don't get rid of the waste and all other things. So this will contribute to it. Also, nationally, of course, as His Royal Highness Prince Sultan mentioned, there were so many stakeholders, and we need to everybody want to work on the same domain, coastal and marine environment. And we had really the national Red Sea Sustainability Strategy to frame 15 economic sectors within a blue economy vision, where the economic benefit could be utilized and reach really while preserving and advancing and improving even the environment of the Red Sea. And this includes the industrial, tourism, shipping, even the research, even environmental conservation, and other aspects, engaging the local communities, other aspects that was addressed by the strategy. And of course, the third challenge is really the rapid growth of activities, both national and regional. And that's why there is the Red Sea Authority was created, so that we want to have a sustainable tourism. And so there is now a lot of prerequisites we are putting now, like whether it's NEOM, the Red Sea, as you know, want to make sure that from the planning, the design, construction, and operation, there is a lifetime stewardship that is really observed, not only by touristic projects, but all projects and activities on the Red Sea. And of course, the most difficult challenge is the fragility of coral reef. It's very fragile. It's very easy to destroy, and it's very hard to restore. I think this is one of the biggest challenges. And the only the way is by exercising utmost level of care when we do our activities nearby coral reef.
Thank you, Dr. Osama. Just picking on that point you made about engaging local communities, I'll move on to Prince Sultan and maybe ask you, we all know how passionate you are about water sports, about diving, and we know that you've also been very passionate about putting together this Red Sea sustainability strategy. What, in your view, is the best way forward to ensure that we are getting the importance of protecting the environment onto the everyday person and making sure that they change their behavior so that we can really see better, improved behavior to protect our Red Sea?
Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as the regulator and licensee of diving operations in Saudi, we have to work with many stakeholders. We were in a unique position that we got to see where people struggle the most, whether it's from a regulatory perspective, official side of things, or regular divers, and we realized there was a big mess. And when I say mess, it doesn't mean it was a negative thing. No, it's just so many stakeholders, over 22 stakeholders, each had rightful ownership of one specific part of that whole chain of things. And how do you bring all of that together? You frame it. If it's not framed, it's a mess. It's a horrible mess that is actually not good for anyone. Now, the biggest challenge for us, I think, was getting to the point of framing and launching the National Red Sea Strategy. We had to figure out how to bring everyone on the same table with the same language, because scientists speak differently, enthusiasts speak differently, military, police, they speak differently, border guards speak differently, lawyers speak differently. So how do we bring all of these people together? That was the steering committee that His Royal Highness mandated, and in all honesty, gave me the honor to be part of, to get to work with my esteemed colleagues. And if everyone else that comes from my side of things, which is the regular population, I'm not a government employee, I don't work for the government, I work for a non-government, non-profit entity, and I just made a small change to help the environment. Without the environment, we wouldn't exist. So I think everyone here, everyone outside COP28 every one of us is an environmentalist. If we weren't, we'd all be dead. I just hope we actually realize that and do something about it before we can't anymore, and we all have a role to play. Myself, that is, again, not government, not a public employee, is an example that, we can do it together as long as we all decide to take a step forward, listen to the experts, play our role, even if it's small. We'll get there, and I hope other stakeholders come along, which they have, thankfully.
Thank you, Prince Sultan. Touching on that point you made about how important it is that we protect the environment, maybe Your Excellency Ayman can tell us a little bit about what are you doing from a tourism perspective to ensure that you're enhancing and adding to the environment, especially the coral reefs that we have, the beautiful coral reefs of the Red Sea, and also any collaborations that you have done or are planning to do with the neighboring countries. If you can pass on the mic.
Thanks for the question. I will start with the last question. We have, of course, a long-term cooperation with Persica, a regional organization. We have been part of their activities long enough, I think, for 20 years. And currently, all the work that you have seen is being done in cooperation with the European Union. We are working with them, funded by the Green Deal. Recently, we got some fund from the Blue Economy under the World Bank. I'm sure, Doctor, that you are familiar with the GFCR initiative, and we are starting this regional project soon, next year. We have a cooperation with Coral Vitae. We are looking at partnerships with other research institutions. We talk to MOT at the States. We are talking to Pasteur. So we are currently in the process of partnership with the international players to make sure that we have the right people in the Gulf of Aqaba, and we welcome them to come and do their research. We will provide the facility, the accommodation. We will facilitate the science there. In terms of protection, declaring the 7 kilometers, which is 1/3 of our shorelines, we are closing the borders from the sea and from the land. It will still be a public beach. But we'll definitely do all the measures in terms of managing the dive centers. We are looking at the capacity that we can allow for each dive centers. We are creating a new dive sites, whether industrial or natural. We translocated some of the corals from the new ports that we built. We are planning to have a nursery, natural nursery, and onshore nurseries. So a lot of activities to frame this protection. And the ultimate goal is to really make sure that we have corals reserved for the new generations, and to make the marine ecosystem in the Gulf of Aqaba available for the world to be utilized as a genetic bank to support whatever has been impacted by the climate change on the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Can I just maybe add one question for Carlos, since you're sitting with us, Professor Carlos? You mentioned CORDAP and the efforts that it has with a lot of countries. Can you tell us where you are on those efforts? How many countries have signed up? Because it's a world, a global initiative. So maybe if you can please just tell us where you are with that.
Thank you, Dr. Maryam. So CORDAP is an entity that was announced and approved by the leaders of the G20 nations in 2020 under the Saudi presidency of the G20. And then following 5 months of establishing the governance of the organization by all countries, then 16 of the G20 nations opted in. The other 4 are welcome to come anytime, and that includes the European Union, which of course is 28 nations today, if I remember correctly. And then we started the operations in June 2021. The first decision was to establish the chair and the deputy chair of the initiative, and we work by unanimous decisions. So all of the nations then unanimously nominated the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Dr. Osama Faqeeha, representing the kingdom as the chair, and the U.S. with Jennifer Kost from NOAA was then appointed as co-chair. In fact, they have been re-elected for a second term. And then we established also the Scientific and Advisory Committee of CORDAP that is balanced. We work in a balanced way, both in terms of geographies, the type of competences that members come, but also a balance between developing and developed nations. So we're very alert by the mandate of the countries that this should be a platform that has a strong contributions from developing nations, which are also the custodians of most of the world's coral reefs. So after establishing the Scientific and Advisory Committee, then a strategic plan was put forward and approved by the Governance Committee. And then we work in 2 different streams. We launched the first call for proposals, where we receive about 90 projects. The projects need to be collaborative, so they're open to any country in the world. So even though the initial governance is by 16 nations, and we also have about 10 organizations in advisory role, including UNEP, ICRI, the UN Global Fund for Coral Reefs, and many others in the governance committee, then every country can participate, and it's open to every type of contributor. So not only academic institutions, but NGOs and also private sector can participate. So we need to have at least 2 countries involved in each project, and at least one of them must be a developing nation with a significant role and a balanced distribution of budget. So in the first call for proposals, we had projects coming from 70 different nations collaborating among them. So that was a very successful call, and we were able to select 15 projects that were selected for funding, and that was approved a few months ago, and now we're finalizing the contracts. So the projects are starting on the ground, and we launched the second call for proposals, we call the program the Coral Accelerated Platform. So the second CAP project was opened a few months ago, and we just closed the first call for concept notes a few weeks ago. And we received 130 proposals this time from many more countries that had participated earlier. So I believe now we're better known to the world, and many countries are seeing opportunities to have their ideas supported by CORDAP. So now we have more participation from, for instance, African nations that did not participate originally, and we probably are engaging now about 120 nations in CORDAP efforts. I need to emphasize also that our mandate is not only with tropical coral reefs, but also with deep water coral reefs or cold water coral reefs, which are below the surface and below the radar screen, but yet they're also vulnerable to human pressures and climate change. And in fact, we'll have a session about climate impacts on cold water coral reefs a couple of days in this same room. So that's where we stand now, but we also are developing a series of scoping workshops by the mandate of the governance committee, where we are advancing roadmaps for technology developments in different areas that were felt that need particular impetus. So those are assisted adaptation to be able to fast track the capacity to for corals to adapt to warming oceans. Also bringing coral nursery to the aquaculture scale. So how are we able to produce millions, not just thousands of corals? And then another workshop that we conducted on deep water coral reefs. Now we are also committed with raising leadership from the Global South. So we are organizing together with the UNEP a workshop that will take place in March in Nairobi to raise the visibility and the leadership from the Global South, because we have very good scientists on coral reef ecology from the Global South, but often they don't have the recognition and visibility they have, particularly in international forums. And then we are working with different organizations to raise that. And we have also an event in COP that is called Unheard Voices. And in fact, there was a risk that they will be truly unheard, because one of the challenges with our colleagues from the Global South is that they don't have the opportunities to come to COP. They don't get accredited, so their voices are not even heard here. So that we finally managed to have their voices heard. So I encourage you to come and listen to what they have to say on the perspectives of what is needed in terms of advancing coral research for the Global South. So that is kind of a rapid overview of what we've done and what we're doing. And now we're opening also CORDAP to more nations. So we're looking at welcoming 6 nations from different geographies into CORDAP. And again, it's open to every nation. It's open also to every organization that is committed with coral reefs. And we look forward welcoming the Kingdom of Jordan as one of our new members in CORDAP. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, for an initiative that only started in the previous G20 and 3 years in the making or less, I think you give a lot of hope to everyone here at COP that these kinds of initiatives that come out of these very formal meetings hopefully do end up with good governance as well as a lot of collaboration. And it sounds like you guys have been really, really busy. So well done to all those efforts that you've done. I'm going to pause here and maybe open it up for a conversation in the room. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I think that hand went up first and then over here. So we'll start with you, please.
Thank you. My name is Hendra Yusransiri. I am also part of the CORDAP as IGC member. Hello, Professor Carlos. So just go back to your explanation, Dr. Osama, regarding the special treatment for the Red Sea. Is it PSSA under IMO, particularly sensitivity sea areas, or what kind of modalities that you apply for the Red Sea program? And second thing, just like to the High Royal Prince, I would like to invite you to go to Raja Ampat and also part of the many diving sport in Indonesia. Thank you. One. Good food, yes. Promise to you.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Osama?
Yes, I just confirmed that. Yes, it's a special marine zone under the IMO. So it is, yes. And we went actually in July. We had a session with the IMO on declaring the Red Sea, and there was an agreement, and we got the vote. And it was a big success for us. It's an effort, really. We spent a good couple of years really working with with many stakeholders, ship owners as well, and others, because Red Sea is a global. It's a global, yeah, marine navigation channel. It's globally important, and Alhamdulillah, yes, it is announced, and it will go into effect in January 1st, 2025, inshallah.
And about, I think the last number I heard was 10% of global trade goes through the Red Sea.
I
Is
think
that right?
it's about 13%.
13%. Wow.
13%.
Wow. Dr. Carlos, you want to add
Just
something?
thank you for the very kind invite. It's a dream, genuinely speaking. Good food or no good food, that was just a joke. I will definitely find time and come. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Carlos?
I just wanted to share one thought, a piece of information about the Red Sea that is poorly known. In fact, I didn't know it until recently. So we always emphasize the amount of shipping that goes and trade that goes to the Red Sea, but the Red Sea also has the highest density of underwater communication cables in the world. So it's not only trade, it's all the data between Asia and Europe and North America flows through the seafloor of the Red Sea, the highest density of communication cables anywhere in the world.
Wow. Question over here.
Thank you. My name is Sam Teicher. I'm the co-founder of Coral Vita, our coral reef restoration company, and very honored to be working with KAUST and the Royal Hashemite Court, as well as with CORDAP. One of the things that was touched on was the excitement about the resiliency of the Red Sea and the potential for corals there to help restoration and conservation strategies not only in the region but around the world. Considering how long international treaties and regulations can be crafted, I'm wondering, rooted in scientific integrity, for anyone who wants to take it, what steps do you think could or should be taken now so that if the time comes when cross-border corals need to be exported, they're not dealing with CITES regulations and violations that won't actually allow for long-term preservation of coral reefs?
Wow. Carlos, do you want to take that question, or? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so in fact, I don't think there's now a current governance framework that can fast-track that process. But we should start the conversation now because, very sadly, we might need to relocate corals across borders because some nations are unfortunately at risk of losing almost all of their last corals. So we need to contemplate that need, and we need to work closely with international organizations to be able to find the pathways to be able to do that without undermining the rest of their due process. And then again, that requires international processes to be addressed. And I was actually thinking as we were discussing that you know all what the Russian doll is, but there's also something that I discovered called the Saudi doll. So the Saudi doll is like a Russian doll, but it's a doll of action at multiple levels. So we have been discussing how the national scene, and His Royal Highness has mentioned the many institutions that have been involved in developing the new framework for the governance of the Red Sea. But there's also a conversation that's starting at the regional level. We have countries, our neighbors to us, that are in difficulties to be able to exert their custody of their natural resources, so they need help, and us helping them also help us, because we have a shared ecosystem, which is the Red Sea. And then there's also an international dimension, and just a few hundred meters from here, or maybe more than 100 meters because this site is huge, but yesterday we were celebrating the Saudi Green Initiative, which is a comprehensive strategy to address all problems in environment in the kingdom, but opening the door. The next doll is that there's something called the Middle East Green Initiative, which is a very generous pledge of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to help address problems in up to, I believe, 44 nations at present, with a very generous funding that was announced last year of 2.5 billion US dollars. So now it's about announcing pledges. We see that every day in COP, but the contributions that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are making beyond their borders are not being fully recognized. And I am looking at Dr. Osama also for leadership in starting that conversation at the international scene with a convention for the trade of endangered species, and also the CBD to be able to enable that condition that inshallah or hopefully will not have to be exerted, but we need to be prepared to be able to export corals to areas that have lost them. And then similar corals from elsewhere are actually better than no corals at all.
I think Dr. Osama just wants to make a remark.
Yes, and I think in addition, CORDAP being scientifically focused on science and innovation, but also we include like UNIP, we include ICRI, which is focused on policy. So I think CORDAP will be a platform to really discuss the science and the policy and what the science found and how can we translate policy to serve the scientific. I think CORDAP is a good platform to initiate the discussion. Of course, it's a long way, but we have to have the platform for this discussion, and I think we have the right mix within CORDAP of stakeholders, and we are expanding it. And then really, we have to have the science and policymakers talking to each other. And then yes, you are right, we will have a long journey to really advance the international global frameworks to really cater for some of the technical objectives.
Yeah.
So one of the things we're going to be exporting from Saudi, which I'm really proud to say, is an actionable strategy, right? A lot of the strategies that you see worldwide don't really start with a very fundamental question, which is this possible? How do we start this or build this for it to be actionable straight away? Who are the smallest stakeholders who tend to be forgotten across the board? Is this strategy pragmatic? Is it possible? How aggressive is it? We tend to prefer, unfortunately, to take a very aggressive approach, which never works. We never learn from that. When we first had our first meeting, if you remember, we were asking, can we actually do this? And how can we change it so it's actually doable and action can be taken by the smallest person? And that was the focus from day one. So we're going to be one of the first, hopefully, that can translate a strategy that is actionable in a pragmatic way that works across the board.
Thank you, Prince Sultan. Let me invite more questions from the audience because I saw a lot of hands up. So let's go over there, your second, and then your third, and then back over there. Okay, so start here.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fahad Al-Guthmi. I work with the Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, and we're the convening agents for one of the GFCR programs in the Western Indian Ocean. I wanted to bring up the elephant in the room, and that is the coral reef funding gap. Apart from public sources of funding, clearly the mandate of the GFCR is to crowd in capital from the private sector. One of the problems that I've noticed is that we tend to focus on a sector-based approach. So if it's tourism, we're going to finance tourism, attract capital in the tourism sector. What is your take on an ecosystem/integrated approach? So for example, project finance for permanence, addressing multiple stresses or degradation factors at once, instead of just one specific sector, because coral reef conservation isn't exactly the most investable, intervention. So I'd just love to hear more about your take on it.
May I just say something? When you say investable, right? I come from the private sector. That's my primary job. The word investable states investment with a return, correct? And the only way that works with coral today is through tourism. So I would change that term from investable to, let's say, maintainable. And I think if we give incentives to the private sector across the board of different things like can be tax write-offs, can be, you name it. If they invest or, let's say, help maintain coral reefs, that would work. But we shouldn't be asking the private sector to just invest in something called an investment when it's not really an investment in their terms, right? So even the language needs to be done, but I know where you're coming from and I agree with it completely. But yeah, I'm sure you guys can come up with something to do that.
Have just one comment. We are looking at conservation here, but it is not really necessary that we spend more on the conservation itself. Our GFCR initiative has 7 components. The most important part is social inclusion and the social aspects. We are creating jobs and making a finance tool for the fishermen, the fisheries, so that they really contribute to the protection of the corals. So it's for you to be creative and intelligent in really making the components to achieve the conservation. So it is not investing in the corals themselves, but around them for the protection.
So if anyone here comes from the investment world, there's a very common term, skin in the game, right? Without skin in the game, nothing's going to happen. And without giving people a buy-in to the idea, they're not going to go forward with it either. You know, we can sit here and say, we need to do, we need to do, we need to do. But the reality is no buy-in. And when I say buy-in, I mean conviction of the idea and how they can actually help. It's never going to work. So we really need to work from that perspective on how we can convince, how we can speak to the majority of people that we can do this. So buy-in is important.
So I'll give some examples on progress in financing coral conservation restoration, and then I'll bring a case study to the table. So on that, again, the Saudi dole of environmental action. So we have, domestically, we have two instruments to be able to finance coral conservation and restoration. And again, the challenge is huge because the countries agreed last year to restore 30% of degraded habitat. So there is no exception for corals not being part of that pledge. So that means that every country needs to start posing that question, how we're going to finance the very difficult task of restoring 30% of degraded coral reefs. So as mentioned by Dr. Osama, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there are two instruments, mostly, but there's a bit more. At the national level, there is the National Environmental Fund, of which I believe Dr. Osama is the vice chair, that has a significant pool of resources to be able to resource all of the conservation and restoration work across land and oceans. And then Dr. Osama also referred to the General Organization for the Conservation of Red Sea Corals and Sea Turtles, which also has generous funding in the billions of US dollars to be able to achieve the commitment of 30% restoration of degraded coral reefs. So in fact, I don't see many nations really lining up the resources required to meet the goals of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework, and even the EU, which was in the conversations last year, part of what they self-claim to be the high-level, the high-ambition coalition. When it came to pass a law in the European Parliament to be able to get the job, they actually already 6 months after agreeing to 30% recovery of degraded habitats, they were only able to pass 20% recovery, right? So even the high-ambition coalition. So I would encourage all nations to really take their commitment seriously and start to think how to put the resources required to achieve the job. And that is not only through public funding, but the participation of the private sector is fundamental, and probably 80% of the effort needs to come from the private sector because governments are already overstretched to be able to provide education, health, safety to their citizens, and they cannot do everything. So there's now a process of disclosure of the impacts of the private sector on biodiversity, and they would have to also contribute to repairing the damages that have been done by polluting the oceans and damaging coral reefs. So again, the Saudi Green Initiative has the Middle East Green Initiative component, which offers resources to neighboring countries, up to 44, to be able to also meet their financial targets. And at the global scale, the UN Global Fund for Coral Reef, it's raising resources to be able to support coral conservation and restoration globally. We actually work together, CORDAP, the UN Global Fund for Coral Reef, and ICRI, and we're planning a joint fundraising campaign to be able to meet that gap. So the Coral Breakthrough that was announced about 2 days ago kind of quantifies the resources required in a very modest way, because I think they quantify 20 billion required to meet the conservation goals of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. I will probably add one more zero to that need, which makes the challenge even bigger. But I think we need to find the tools and instruments to be able to resource the effort. And I was inspired by one. So when we talk about big global numbers, it's always very challenging and it seems impossible. But people don't really work on global reefs. I work as a citizen. I care about the reef that provides my livelihood or where I go swimming, so I'm very committed to that reef. And when we translate that to individual terms, in fact, meeting the goals of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework really mean that for each individual reef of about 1 square kilometers of median size, then we need to restore something equivalent to 4 tennis courts. That's what it means when we talk about an individual reef. So my best friend and I, if we commit 1 weekend a year, we can actually get it done. And we will not struggle much with the resources. So it's about bringing all of that to the individual level, to the people that are committed with coral reefs. And I'd like to close this long statement by calling out my friend and colleague, Andreas Hutanahan, who's also participating in. So Andreas, please stand up. So Andreas is with the Indonesian government, and he leads the Indonesian Coral Garden Initiative. So in Bali, during the COVID lockdown, then the economy froze, literally froze. So they were under strict lockdown for 2 years. The economy depends exclusively on tourism, and people were actually experiencing hunger. So Andreas managed to convince, along with his colleagues, the Indonesian government to release aid package, COVID alleviation package, not to stay at home, but to actually engage in coral restoration. And he mobilized 15,000 citizens during 5 months, one of them scuba divers, which didn't have a job because there was no tourists to take to sea, to restore coral reefs, and in 5 months, they restored 75 hectares. So that not only was a case of success. Andreas just has a book now that I encourage Andreas to share that experience with the world. But it was so successful, not only in terms of the ocean benefits, but community benefits, that people are very engaged with coral restoration. And now the goal is to restore 1,000 hectares by 2025, I believe. So that's Indonesia, that's the commitment of people, and that's the work of individual citizens committed with the future of the natural resources. Thank you, Andres.
We seem to be running out of time, so we have 2 minutes left. I'm going to apologize to those with questions. Please grab our panelists at the end, and maybe I'll just give one last round to our panelists to say something about what's your last words of hope, or what would you want as an outcome from COP28 or from all the efforts that are happening. We'll start with you, Dr. Osama.
I think do your part, and I mean, this is what the last thing. I think Andreas is a great example of how one person made a big difference. He took the initiative, he utilized negative circumstances. With COVID-19, he used the challenge, converted it to an opportunity. I think do your part, convert challenges to opportunities, and I think it's not the government alone, it's not the private sector alone, it's not scientific, it's all of us together. I think do your part and it will impact. I think that's what I can say.
Thank you, Dr. Osama. Prince Sultan?
He took the words right out of my mouth. So I'm going to say exactly what he said. Just do something. Don't sit around. Do something. It's simple as that.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Ayman?
Yeah, just be environmentalist. Think of those who needs to breathe with us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Carlos?
Maybe for me, my eye-opening thought is that sometimes we project our current capabilities into the future, and it seems like we pledge to do is impossible. But it's precisely why it is impossible today that we need science and technology, because that's the way that we redefine the boundaries of the possible. So do not be deterred by thinking that what you aim to achieve, for instance, restoring 30% of degraded habitats, is impossible, because we can redefine what is possible and what is not through science and technology and the support of society. And I like also to acknowledge the audience that is following this live stream in YouTube, and thank them also for their time.
Thank you. Thank you to our fellow panelists. Thank you to everyone in the audience for being with us. You've all given us a lot of hope. So thank you, and thank you all for coming and joining us today.